Hey, if you needed more motivation to have the best DC summer ever, this is it. District Bridges' Summer Bucket List runs June 15th to August 15th across DC. Here's how it works. Earn points and climb District Bridges' leaderboard by supporting local businesses, attending cool events, and crossing things off your summer bucket list. Top players can earn up to $250 in local business gift cards just by visiting pools, exploring museums, and sipping frozen cocktails. It's the ultimate DC staycation. Show some love for the city we call home. Join the summer bucket list and celebrate what makes DC truly special. Sign up now and track your progress at districtbridges.org/DC Summer Bucket List. Today on CityCast DC, a European mega spa is coming to the banks of the Anacostia. It's something the city says is going to become a transformative destination. But the company behind it was recently the subject of a pretty unflattering New York Times report about their projects elsewhere. Is their DC project on track? We talked to the Washington Business Journal's Daniel Sernovitz and Ben Peters. Today is Thursday, June 5th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Dan.
Hi, how are you, Michael?
Good. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
So you guys, let me just start with the first things first. What exactly is Therme Spa in DC?
The way I've thought about it is it's like a water park for adults is kind of the best way to think about it. It's an indoor, what they're calling a well-being resort that is going to have things like water slides and saunas and hot tubs. And it's going to be right along the Anacostia River on Poplar Point in kind of this yet untapped, I should say, part of the district.
It's a $500 million estimated development that is going to supposedly draw 12,000 people a day to east of the Anacostia, just at the foot of the Frederick Douglass Bridge. And so it's a massive, massive development.
The renderings look incredibly fancy. What is it supposed to look like when it's done?
They've kind of shopped around a photograph of one of their other resorts in Romania that we've used on some stories. And it honestly looks a lot like that rendering. It's a big greenhouse-looking structure that's like totally enclosed in glass and has palm trees inside of it. And both inside and outside of it are what look like hot springs. Not that this is what DC is necessarily going to look like. The company has kind of been clear that they try to model their resorts and tailor them to specific locations. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to look a lot like that.
On that, because I think they flew some people there, they won this contract or the right to develop Poplar Point, which is, again, sort of on the east side of the Anacostia, a part of town that has very little sort of tourist attraction infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a complicated process that has been kind of started and stopped several times over the past decade, where the district has tried to regain control of that site for the National Park Service. And I think Therme is certainly one way in which they're going to do it. They are hoping to have control of the site before the end of the year. But there's a whole lengthy list of procedures that needs to be undertaken before DC before they can get control of the site, which will preclude any shovels hitting the dirt on Therme actually being developed.
And why does the city want to develop it?
So it's been described as one of the last great waterfront development sites on the East Coast. That phrase, I should say, has been bandied around several times as I've been covering this. And I think they just view it as this perfect location that's untapped, that they've wanted to develop for so long. It's right on the water. You can see the Washington Monument. You can see the Capitol building from it. The Navy Yard is right across the waterway. There's some new multifamily investments east of the Anacostia too. That's kind of helping to activate that part of town. I think they just view it as an untapped part of the district that needs something to activate it. That needs an anchor, and they view Therme as that anchor.
I do want to interject on one point. Poplar Point is a much bigger area than just what the district has promised to Therme. And it's got a lot of background in terms of environmental contamination and cleanup. And there are moving pieces. The district is going to have to relocate the park police as part of this larger deal. And so it's not just going to be Therme overtaking all of Poplar Point.
Tell me what the company's deal is, Therm. I know they're based in Vienna. They've got this facility in Bucharest. I think of East Central Europe as sort of the kind of public bath culture is part of the culture there. I don't think of that in DC or in North America. Do they envision that they are going to sort of convert us to that lifestyle?
Maybe Dan can touch on this a little bit more, since he tends to cover the hospitality side of this business. Maybe I'm reading too much into what they say, but I think that they view this as like a place for people to come unwind, like after a long day's work. And, you know, people always talk about DC being a stressed out city. And I think that they see this as a place that, during the day, they'll have like retirees there and maybe kids who are on summer break, but then in the afternoon the younger crowd's going to come out and people are going to leave work and hop on the metro over to Anacostia and go unwind at the spa. I think that's how they're pitching this.
They're putting a lot of money behind this. They've got ambitious plans to expand across North America. Before they came to DC, they had started with a big planned development up in Ontario, which has come under a lot of public scrutiny. But alongside DC and Ontario, they also earlier this year announced another site in Dallas. And they've recently gotten backing from a New York-based company, the Georgetown Companies. And they're putting a lot of money and a lot of heft into establishing a footprint here that isn't necessarily here. We don't necessarily have, except maybe for like Korean spas in the area and, more family-oriented water parks. There isn't much of this to be had in the U.S.
And it's the idea that these are for locals or tourists, like people will go to a place in order to go to one of these.
Probably more of a, at least regional destination. The numbers that they're putting out, something like 12,000 visitors daily, I don't think that's all just from the Washington, D.C. area. And so it seems like they are spacing these things out to be larger draws. I don't know if you're going to have one in as close by as Baltimore or Richmond. I don't know precisely how closely they want to locate these things, but it seems that this isn't just a one-off deal.
One of Shakespeare's classics is now playing at the Folger Theater in a production you do not want to miss. The Folger's production of Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's great comedy about loss, love, and identity, is given a modern-day twist in this production, set in an underground club in a faltering empire, and it's full of joyful excess and lavish costumes. I'm telling you, you are going to leave this play wheezing from all the laughs and gasps. The Washington Post called it shamelessly entertaining, vibrant, and big-hearted. Y'all know I love going to plays, and DC's theater scene is absolutely on fire right now. Performances are on now and run through June 22nd, but tickets are going fast. So get yours today at folger.edu/12thnight. That's folger.edu/12thnight.
If you are a CityCast superfan, you've definitely heard us singing the praises of our longtime supporter, Paulson & Nace. So there's big news. Paulson & Nace is now Nace Law Group. Same great team, just with a new name. When you are hurt by the negligence of others, you want a lawyer that will actually fight for you, not one that will settle for the bare minimum. NACE's compassionate lawyers fight to bring cases to juries, so you can get everything you deserve. If you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call NACE Law Group for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.washingtondcinjurylawyers.com or call 202-463-1999.
You don't need to use an oversized AI model for everything, just like you don't need to use an axe to slice a cake. Find out how smaller models can deliver the right results and help cut AI costs up to 90% at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM.
Poplar Point, it's obviously a spot of fairly high priority for the city. It's one of the last remaining waterfront undeveloped spaces. And the city has given this company the right to develop it. The New York Times had a long investigation of this company, which is also developing like Toronto Island, that suggested some shady stuff is afoot. What did they report, and what has the company said to DC since then?
The New York Times, like you said, had this kind of pretty lengthy investigation into Therm that, at least from our perspective, raised a bunch of questions about the company's ability to carry out what they are proposing in the district. The New York Times found that Therm had misrepresented the true scale of its business when it was working with the Canadian government to get its resort along the Toronto waterfront off the ground. Therm had, according to the Times, and we saw this too, they had on their website advertised 4 active European locations, 3 in Germany, 1 in Romania. We had actually reported that in the past. We went through past reporting after this Times story came out, and we're like, whoa, they misled us too. When in reality, the only spa that it had ever opened was the one in Bucharest. The Times also noted that there were 2 companies named with variations of Therm that had similar logos. It seemed to indicate that they had maybe co-opted this other company's logo. Not the most important piece of the story, in my opinion. But the Ontario government, in an audit they did of this huge redevelopment of Toronto's waterfront that included Therm as well as other uses, found that Therm was losing money and had less than 1.1 million in equity as it pitched the Ontario project. Therm, in response to the New York Times reporting, said that the Times had failed to reflect the company's financial standing in 2025, saying Therm is, quote, a well-capitalized global enterprise backed by over $1 billion in support from respected institutional investors and third-party financing partners. And then after the Times story published, the Ontario Premier Doug Ford initiated a review of the contract that granted Therm a 95-year lease on the province's waterfront. The district, for their part, has said nothing about this. We had reached out to the mayor's office, the deputy mayor's office, when we were reporting this. They had declined to comment. And the mayor, when asked about this at a press conference a couple weeks ago, said something to the effect of, we are continuing our environmental review of Poplar Point, which is one of the many steps that the district is taking in order to get the land back from the National Park Service.
I find this just incredible. This is a premier space. It's a big deal. And whether this Times report is right or not, I find it incredible that the city would not engage with that reporting to sort of answer questions about their own due diligence. Do you have any sense of why?
It's a delicate subject, obviously. There are a lot of moving parts, and part of this is a question of under what circumstances will the district grant Therm the use of this prime real estate. We haven't gotten the chance to learn, is it going to be a long-term lease? Is there going to be district financing involved? We don't know any of that. And I suspect all of that is now under negotiation. And so for the district to comment one way or the other puts them on questionable ground in terms of negotiating tactic.
Understood. So who is Therm as far as their project in Washington goes? I know they've worked with former local economic development folks. Who's representing them? Who have they brought along?
That's a great question. The head of their U.S. operation is a guy named John Alschuler. He is a familiar name in D.C. Way back when the district completed its Anacostia redevelopment plan, John was with a firm called HR&A. And they were one of the consulting firms that helped the district craft this larger vision for the Anacostia. And HR&A didn't just do that. They've got a portfolio of projects, including the High Line up in New York. So they're a big, well-recognized firm. And after nearly 4 decades, John had retired from this firm in January of 2022 in order to take a role as the head of the U.S. operations for Therm. And That's part of the DC connection.
Right. So they've got people who really sort of know their way around the city.
They do. They also have a woman named Sharon Carney, who was formerly chief of staff at DEMPED, deputy mayor for planning and economic development, the city's economic development department. Back in May of 23, she was amongst the district officials out for the big announcement when Mayor Bowser revealed that it was working to find Therm A space somewhere in the district. Now, Sharon had left DEMPED in September 2023 and was named a principal at HRNA in January of 2024.
The other person, I think, who interestingly has who's become employed with Therm is Wanda Lockridge, the longtime chief of staff of ex-Ward 8 councilmember Shreyan White. She is now Therm's director of community relations. She sat on a panel put on by the Anacostia bid a week or so ago representing Therm and just kind of touting it as the next great thing east of the river.
Let's talk about Poplar Point for a second, because as you've noted, Therm's not the only thing that's going to go there. You know, when they close their eyes and dream big, what do city officials want to see there at Poplar Point? And I assume there's other parcels that are still up for grabs.
I think what district officials want to see there is Therm, but there are all of these various alternatives that they're required to make as they go through the planning process here for this site. And all of them, one of them contains Therm. I think that the district would tell you that is their preferred alternative, is the one with the anchor use. But, you know, there's outdoor spaces, wetlands, they're calling them educational wetlands, multi-use play fields. They're required to have memorials along the waterfront. The other interesting thing is several of these proposals call for a taxi, a water taxi, to connect Navy Yard to Poplar Point. And some, you know, reconfigurations of roads to make Poplar Point more accessible to the neighborhoods east of the river. But as of yet, there have not been any other development proposals put forward. That the anchor use of that has been awarded to Therm is the primary development. They have to go through the National Capital Planning Commission in order for national planners to ensure that view sheds of monuments and other major structures in D.C. are unimpeded. And the National Capital Planning Commission staff recently had kind of raised concerns that the anchor for Poplar Point, which in this case would be a Therm resort, could impede views toward the Washington Monument and the Capitol. But, you know, it's hard to say because there isn't actually a set in stone design for what Therm's resort is going to look like. They can design this in such a way that directly addresses that concern.
Is there any chance they could lose that award?
I don't know about the process. It's important to point out that in August of 24, the district had selected HRNA, which we've discussed, to act as their owner's rep. And they are exploring other options for this massive swath of land. It's Poplar Point itself is 110 acres.
So federal law requires that 70 of the site's 110 acres be set aside for public park space. That leaves 40 acres of developable land, about half, so yeah, about 15 acres is now poised to be taken up by Therm. And then eventually, at some point down the line, DEMPED, the deputy mayor's office, is going to issue a request for proposals for the remaining 25 developable acres. When that RFP is going to come down is totally unclear.
All right, Dan, Ben, thank you guys for being here.
Sure thing.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.